Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Hey there, welcome to episode 32 of The Rewind. This is a show where we talk about Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen, and all the interesting things going on around the game's development. We will give you the latest news and the updates from Visionary Realms. We'll also recap any official developer streams, even sneak in a little lore now and then. But the heart of the show is you, and that's the community. As we take your thoughts, whether it's from forum posts or social media, or even like questions you send us directly. And we like to shed some light on what people think about various issues and topics. You know, and sometimes we're pretty much on the same page. It's like, you know, it's a wonderful harmony of ideas, or it's a beautiful chorus of agreement, or something like that. But then there was last week. If you missed episode 31 last week, I suggest you maybe give it a listen and be prepared, because it gets a little raucous in the midsection there. And on that note, I turn to my raucous co-host and my compadre, and a man with strong opinions about everything, including meaningful choices in games. Minus. So I got two questions for you, dude. How are you? And what meaningful choices have you made this week?
So we'll start with the second one there. And if I'm going by the community that posted on the forum post you read, I made absolutely zero meaningful choices. Absolutely none. I never have in my entire life. No. Lots. Every day is a meaningful choice. Every day getting up and saying, okay, let's do this again. It's a meaningful choice. But no, how am I? I'm good. I'm tired. This is the time of year where work is pretty crazy. I'm working really long hours. I get home. I got home about 10 minutes before we started recording this, and getting ready for it, and then record it, and we'll edit it, and we'll put it. So it's just crazy. It's absolute craziness. This is why I'm not a fan of holidays, because I've worked retail for so long. For me, like the holidays of choice are New Year's, where it's about drinking and being through the holiday, and then 4th of July again about drinking. There's kind of a trend with the holidays I like. They usually involve drinking. So
that's fair. Those are my favorite ones too. Imagine that. What a strange coincidence. Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I don't work in retail. I haven't since for a long time, and I feel for you. I can't. That must not be fun. I have the kind of job that isn't affected by the holiday season, so I'm sort of fortunate that way. But it's busy here too. And but let's get the show rolling. What do you think?
Sounds good, man. Let's go.
This week in Visionary Realms news and notes.
All right, so this is where we talk about news and notes from VR updates as they're going on, and we typically check in with their Twitter and see what they're kind of talking about and getting the community talking about. So the first thing we're going to start with today is actually the Developers Roundtable featuring Kyle Olson. I really actually enjoyed this quite a bit. And what I did is I took a lot of notes. So I'm actually going to kind of go through some of my notes. And keep in mind, this isn't me like reading exactly from what Kyle said. It's kind of surmising some of his points. So as always, when we recap anything VR, we always tell you if it interests you what we talk about, go back and watch the full thing, because there's going to be bits and pieces we don't cover. And there might be a little more clarity to some of the things we talk about as well. And also sometimes we just take it differently than maybe you would if you heard it directly from the horse's mouth. So for those of you that don't know Kyle came on, I want to say that he might have came on late 2018, but he was kind of introduced to the community for the first time on the developer stream in April of 2019. And they kind of hint that he had been around for a little bit, but this is the first time they kind of talked openly about Kyle joining the team. So he is the lead programmer, I believe, is what his official title is. And he has done a lot for Pantheon, and his interjection into the team in the middle of Project Fairtale is what has really been a huge part of the game being reimagined and recreated. And some of those steps back to step forward have really been because of Kyle, and it's been the right decisions for sure. I think we've talked that to death already. So what I'm going to do here, Theric, and please, as I read through some of these key points that I came away with, if you want to add to it, please just jump in as always. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So the key points to me, the first one was, so the game is running almost entirely server side. They said that everything in the game is event based, where the client asks for permission, and then, the request goes in and the server either, approves or denies. Like everything's being built, and the word he used was an authoritative manner. And basically this is to create a huge sense of security in the game. So the biggest thing here really is that they're trying to squash cheating, including things like gold hacks, bots, etc., where the server is really going to control the game. And they go into a lot more detail about why that is and why it's important. But, there were a lot of questions from the community that he talked about this a few times, actually, in a few different ways. But just, that they're really thinking about how to stop people from being able to hack in and do things to their characters they shouldn't be able to do, which would obviously create some issues for everybody in the world. Yeah. So, good.
No, I was just gonna say he had some interesting points that I hadn't considered before. He talked about it from a perspective of, doing security updates, and basically in any situation, it sounds like, from a programming standpoint, whoever updates last sort of wins, right? Yeah, like that's the person who always has the upper hand. And he talked about his background from playing FPS games, specifically like CSGO, and he said basically you can't do anything in those kinds of games to prevent, hacks or that kind of stuff. But in an MMO, because you don't let the client do anything, like you said, making it authoritative, you have much more control, ability to prevent that kind of stuff. And he said even though their client isn't like 100% a dumb client, I think were the words he used, they just have much more control over the amount of information that goes back and forth and what gets verified by the server.
Yeah, and he kind of talked too about like single player games or co-op games where the developer doesn't really have to care. Like if someone goes in and edits their character a little bit, like Borderlands kind of had this for Borderlands 2 on Xbox. You could like edit your character file and create a save file by the computer and then go in and you have all your abilities and stuff.
Oh, really?
So for stuff like that, it doesn't really matter, right? It's a co-op game. It's limited players. I mean, it can affect the game in a little bit, but it's not going to be like game breaking. Whereas in an MMO, that would absolutely break the game. It would pretty much ruin the game as soon as people could dupe items and do all this different stuff. And he kind of said like, yeah, for those types of games, like those developers are lucky because they really don't have to worry about this. Whereas every single thing they do here, they have to think about it. So it's a much more, it's a very grand scale project to make sure that everything's created in a way where they're controlling it, which also means more processing on their end and being efficient with it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I learned a lot from listening to him. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know that he talked about as from a technical aspect that I didn't realize. That was pretty informative.
Yeah. So just a background a little bit on Kyle. So he originally got into gaming in developing, thinking that he'd be a level designer. It kind of goes back to what you were about to kind of touch on there. He was like highly influenced by Quake and a bunch of the different Quakes, right? Because he loved modding and level creating in those games and all those games that kind of supported that style. So he'd create levels with the level creators and he just loved it. He said, however, he kind of fell out of that because he realized he's not an artist. And he said that that's a big part of being a level designer from like, not just mods, but creating a game. And he kind of fell into the role that he now sort of specializes in. So nice little background there on Kyle and what he's been through. We're going to talk a little bit more about his experience too here in a second. So,
yeah.
The other thing he talked about that I thought was really interesting and kind of speaks to, the team at VR and also his skill set. But he talked about, one of the things that he likes most about working with VR is that they've given him a huge amount of freedom to control what he thinks needs done. And this comes to like where they are now and how he got them there and how the code was reworked. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But the team just really seems to really trust him. And to give him this freedom, he even develops like frameworks that others work in. And creates like this overall efficiency for, a designer, for example, to be able to design a boss fight or design different things like that. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting to me. And it seems like that freedom's a big part of that, the culture that VR brings and he's going to thrive in. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really important that you mentioned that because it's, in any position, any job you work in, you're brought in because you have skills and talents. And when you're allowed to make the most of those, to maximize though, that's a great feeling, and you can tell he's all in on the project, which is awesome. You can hear, how he's, got this sense of, I can use my talents. I'm not constrained in any way to sort of, I can only do this little piece of, this is my area, my cubicle, and I have to sort of stay within my lane kind of thing. I feel like he's got this wide expanse of responsibility, which is pretty cool. You know, I saw a comment on the YouTube video that they put up about with this stream, and somebody said, "Please, Kyle, use your powers for good, not evil." You know, because when you have all this control and you have this wide range of responsibilities and such an important part of the process, you know, it's good to have somebody you trust that much. So,
yeah, for sure. And going more on his, you know, his past and what he's done before VR, is he's actually been diagnosing and cleaning up code for a long time through contract work. So like he talked about it, he would approach games that were almost done and where he would be brought in to either like squash issues that they just have never been able to fix, you know, throughout the entire development, or perhaps like they just needed overall optimization before being able to release a game. And that's pretty crazy. Like, imagine bringing somebody into a game that's been worked on for X amount of time, has no experience in the game, doesn't know what the game is, and has to go directly into the code and say, oh, here's how to fix this problem you haven't been able to fix through all of development, or here's how to make your game run better. I think that says a lot about what he does. Now, he did note that, you know, this has mostly been in mobile games, and he explained that Pantheon is definitely a unique challenge because it just has such amazing scale when you're talking about an MMORPG. But, you know, and some people may say, well, there's a big difference between mobile and this. But again, it's that whole concept of, well, I'm going to come and look at this project people have been working on for 1, 2, 3 years, whatever it's been, or however long it's been, and I'm going to just fix everything they haven't been able to fix in this entire time frame. I get that mobile games are smaller than a game like Pantheon, but at the same time, he's coming in and now he's part of the team, right? And that's, I think, really beneficial because if he's able to come in and look at code that, you know, he hasn't seen before and fix that, imagine what he would do from the ground level with it. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? You got to start somewhere. What are you gonna? You don't start off by writing a novel. You start off by writing small articles or doing little project pieces. And you know, if this is a scaling up, a ramping up of the scope for his challenge, you know, it sounds like he's certainly capable of managing it. One of the things that he talked about is his tools, right, and how he what he does to get away or to focus. And he talked about, you know, using meditation and sort of sitting in a dark room and just sort of thinking about the code or thinking about everything but the code, right? And I'm a huge proponent of meditation just in general. And I think for a young guy, he seems like, you know, he's got some wisdom, you know, beyond his years there. So it's good to hear.
Yeah. So this is where we can get a little technical. But so one of the questions that was asked was in regards to optimization of the netcode and processing power. He kind of got into some of the details on what that means because he had talked about that actually back in April 2019, and he provided a little more clarity. So he said that they had this test situation, which would run 140,000 simultaneous moving pieces at once from their side. And it would basically see what does that mean for their processors and what does it mean for their network cards, right? So that said, the client side is typically always going to be limited by their connection speeds. Right, if someone's using DSL, it doesn't matter how fast the servers for Pantheon is. Like they're only going to be able to receive at a certain time. So there has to be some optimization there as well. So it means that really, you know, what they've done is they don't need to spend as much money to handle the server side processing as they did before because the code has just really increased the overall efficiency. So prior to the change and all the stuff that they've been doing during Project Fairsail to fix this netcode and fix the underlying code of how things work together, the network cards are now handling most of the issues, like most of the processing. And the CPU before was maxed out when they did that demo of the 140,000 moving pieces. So now they're maxing out the network card with this demo, but the CPU is only sitting at about a 50% use. So what does this mean? Like, you know, this is a very high level speak. Basically what he said is it allows them to add more AI, like more artificial intelligences throughout the entirety of the design and doing different things for them. And basically then they can just throttle the speed at which the data is sent back. So again, some of this is kind of high level. I hope I've explained it in a little lower level, but it just means that they're able to do a lot more with less and really only be limited by the connection speed of the player when it comes to how the servers are going to handle this game. And I think that that's huge. I think that's really important because they're saying basically before, if it was at 100% CPU and they couldn't add more AIs and they couldn't add more data being done, I mean, wouldn't that limit in a sense like animations or new spells or, you know, if you're at 100%, if you're at 100% on usage, like, you're in trouble. So really important, I think, for the future of the game and designing expansions and building the game up. I think that's one of the most important things Kyle's brought to the team for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely.
So we put him on the spot for having a nickname, right? Everybody has a nickname. Joppa, Mikhail, Ronik, Sacred. We can go on and on and on, right? So he finally kind of caved and said he had a character named Iijii. And of course, it's spelled very troll-like. This was in WoW because someone got his old character name banned. So he made a name that was hard to see on quick notice. So it's spelled like Iijii. And it, when they're all lowercase, it's a nightmare, right? But it's pronounced Iijii. And it seems like it's sticking. People are starting to use it. So Kyle has Iijii for sure.
Yeah, that's a weird one. It's a weird one. I can see how that would be difficult to say. I don't think I would.
Wait a second. What's Gerhardt's name?
Oh yeah, no, that's a good example. Yeah, Stulame.
Yeah, come on. I mean,
but that one has really like much worse than
a Stulame.
It has like a cadence to it. It's got like a artistic flair. This definitely sounds like a name that was just made to make my life difficult.
Iijii. If I have to reply to him. I spell it Eegee. Iijii. That's nice and easy. I don't know.
I guess.
So this one is where I'm waiting for a little debate. This is a small piece of things that Minus does on podcasts that get people all fired up and crazy. But listen, I didn't say it. I'm reporting on something that was said. Okay, so let's make. Is that clear enough? Do I have to say it again, or are people in the comments just going to rip me apart and call me a douchebag again?
I will ensure people understand this.
So Kyle made a bold statement. I'm behind it. So that's where I'll get in trouble. But I think it may cause some concern for a segment of our community that want a very simplistic interface experience with no judging and basically no add-ons and a bare minimum skinning of the interface. Kyle was pretty clear in saying pretty straight up that he thinks in this day and age that add-ons and skinning should exist in an MMORPG and is almost required. He did, however, say perhaps it won't be the same as a game like WoW that has APIs available for people to access and create, and perhaps maybe they're made more in-house. For example, he said, he thinks an in-house DPS meter should exist. I think it's a great idea. I hope it makes its way in. Theric, what do you think? What do you think the community thought of this message? And am I going to get beat up for agreeing with Kyle?
No. It's definitely his idea or his view of things. I don't know. It's hard not to agree with him. I mean, if somebody who's working in the field and living and breathing this kind of thing every day, I think at the end of the day, it's up to Joppa as the creative director to sort of say what they, what kind of interface they want to proceed with and that kind of stuff. But, certainly if Kyle does a great job with the programming and has a sense of these things, I think they'd be foolish not to listen to him, of course. We can talk about that. We can do a whole episode on this subject about interface and add-ons and all that stuff. I think we've done it a little bit already, but yeah, no, I'm glad that he said something that was music to your ears. I'm not sure I'm on board as much, but we'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
I would love to get into a very in-depth conversation with you. No holds barred about DPS meters and what they bring, because I am, that I'm on such a different side because I have used them for so much good. It's just people are so jaded that it's such a bad thing. And I literally can list names and so many things where those meters increase the quality of people's lives because I was able to help them by the use of having numbers. But we won't get into it today. Okay. But it's definitely coming. That's for sure.
Put on the back burner for now.
Yeah. I think this episode's already going to get me in trouble, so I definitely need to stop there.
Yep.
So, okay. The last one here. News that will get everybody excited. He dropped some beans about the next class being completed, being the Enchanter. And he had talked a bit about how fast classes can be put online at this point. And currently the Rogue process was really fast. And Joppa and Sacred, this was funny to me, put the Wizard together with the tools that were created, and Kyle didn't even know.
Yeah, that was hilarious. I can't believe that.
Right? Like all of a sudden, hey, the Wizard's here.
You which was show up for cool. Work one day and there's a new class. You're like, oh, when did this come along? Where did you come from?
So interestingly, he said that the Rogue was put together in 2 weeks. And he even made a joke about this. Great. Now people are going to hear we put the Rogue in 2 weeks. And they're going to be like, well, why aren't Bard and Necro in? Well, to be very clear, the rogue was put together in 2 weeks because the rogue doc and direction was already completely laid out. All the animations were done, all the skills were done already, because even though they had to restart and rebuild some of these classes with the node-based system and the way that they're doing the designing now, it doesn't mean that like the whole rogue they developed before is gone, right? Like it's all imagined in there. It's like keying it in and putting in the pieces. But because they had everything already in the design doc, it only took them 2 weeks. That's crazy to me. Crazy, especially playing the rogue as much as I did and how much I enjoyed it. To know that was only 2 weeks of implementation. Obviously we know there's going to be balancing, there's going to be fixed, but it was phenomenal. It was awesome. So to know that a lot of the core classes of the game have already been pretty much fully designed, and this is what it's going to take to get them in. I mean, we're going to see some really fast progress, and we've talked about that a little bit. This development piece is going to be huge, I think. So, well,
everybody out there, all those summoners are now wondering what is taking so long with the summoner. Where's my summoner? Bring us the summoner now. So hopefully that, that affects the summoners development, because it's one that people have been asking for a long time to see just a little piece of it, and we haven't seen it yet. So I liked what he said about the node craft process. I think that's really interesting. I'd love to hear more about that in the future. Like, just explain that a little bit more in depth, because I thought that sounds like a really interesting.
They showed. Do you remember the old VR thing where they showed the node system? It was like the little it was a while ago. It was on a dev stream, and they scrolled from left to right, and you saw all these nodes. And they had originally showed the node system, I think, for like a quest tree, but the node system was still. That was how they were moving to designing everything through a node system, which would be like how encounters are made and how designers can design an encounter without having to have a programmer right by them because of this node system. And I think the first time we saw it was quest based, but they had talked about how it could do everything, right? Like everything. So
yeah, I guess I just didn't put the pieces together that they could transpose that into a class development sort of way, framework.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. So real quick on your summoner point, the issue with summoner is that, so when you design a class that's, you barely have to play and the class plays for you, it's probably a little harder to design. Those pet classes are just, easy mode. I turn the game on, my pet does all the work, and I just sit back. So it's probably hard because, these pets have to simulate an entire player experience. Like, as a rogue, I don't have something just doing everything for me. I actually have to have like reaction time, and I have to actually pay attention. But, summoners are a little harder because once you make this AI do everything for them, it's a little harder. So it's probably going to take a while to have that summoner in because of that.
Hold on. I'll be right back. I have to go batten down my front door because I hear the army of summoners coming up the street to invade my house because what you just said. So I'm not with this man. Summoners, please. He does not speak for me.
I'm joking. Listen, in Blade and Soul, I played the summoner class, and it was considered the most broken OP class in the world. And I played it, and I loved it. And I played a summoner in Final Fantasy 14. I'm just kidding. I'm usually not a big fan of pet classes, but when it's done right, they're super fun. So just busting some balls. Nice. So Theric, overall, I thought that there were a lot of key good points here. He dug into the development process. I just, overall, man, Kyle just really comes off as extremely confident and extremely knowledgeable. Like, he was just firing off answers. He didn't even have to think about it much. He just firing off answers and really talking about his experience and seemed enthusiastic. There's a few people when in the community, in the Pantheon community, like the VR team, when they speak, you sense their level of knowledge, right? Like Gerhardt's one of them. Joppa's one of them. And this isn't a knock on anybody else. It's just this high level, like, excitement and understanding of the things they're talking about. And he really came off like that level to me. So was there anything I forgot or you wanted to add, or just what did you think?
Yeah, well, just the last point I wanted to make, you're talking about how he came off. I think that it's important that he came off very honest as well, because at the end he did note, like they asked him, what are your concerns? And he did say, there's still a lot of art to do. Like he talked about one of the areas that there still is a ton of work to do in. And so I always appreciate that honesty, instead of some sort of like stock answer. Like, it's like, well, we have a roadmap and we're working down the thing. It's like, no, okay, here's something that I'm specifically, I can identify. So I think that's important to come off as genuine like that. So I appreciated that.
Yeah. There's a lot of times he was like, I don't think I'm supposed to say this, but and he does anyway. So
that's right.
That he's trusted if he can kind of just talk freely like that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, if you guys want to see more or hear more from Kyle himself, go check that out. It's really cool. We have it up on Pantheon.plus. You can also check it out on VR's YouTube page. It's good. It's a good one. It's an hour. They're always an hour. If you have the time to throw it on in the background, there's nothing to watch. So you just kind of listen to it like a podcast. I recommend it. I think that learning more about Kyle and what he's going through will help you feel, I think, more comfortable with where Pantheon is. So moving on from there, we're going to talk about the Twitter post that was made by the Pantheon MMO Twitter. And this was an interesting one. They said, do you guys agree with electing other community members as in-game kings, queens, lords, or leaders of any time that gives them control over certain aspects of the game? So this exists in some various games where you can become like a mayor or take over a part of the land. It isn't completely uncommon in MMORPGs, but you don't find it in like the top tier MMORPGs. It's like that next tier that you see this in.
It's sort of like a niche thing.
Yeah, it's very much so. So let's read through the comments and me and you can break down our thoughts on it. But Princess Ruto said, the idea sounds really cool on paper, but typically when there's an in-game elect system, it can call for PvP or some form. And that leader elect typically belongs to a giant guild, which kind of bottlenecks everyone else unless other players pay X amount to have X size guild win a duel. So kind of, it's an idea. They say it's a good idea, but
Yeah, they're just saying like it goes too far, right? It gets taken to the nth degree and you get this, this massive system that doesn't really work too well.
Yeah, Jeremy Hamilton says that if there were prerequisites tied to it, such as having, deal with X amount of threats in said territory or some other metrics besides popularity to elect.
Sure. Okay.
Breakout says there aren't enough curse words in the world to say no. Disposalist says, politics in a game. Let me think. No thanks. Really? No.
Yeah. The timing of this question was sort of odd.
Oh, yeah, you're not kidding. Yeah. That was a point of it. Dan Scholl says no, because we would see people vote for a king because his name was something like Prentice.
Yeah, of course. You're going to see that in the first 10 seconds of a system like this. 100%.
Eldinian. I hope that's right, because I can't pronounce it. I think I've even said his name wrong a bunch of times. I've gone back and forth, he says, without clear and unmistakable expectations of conduct. I see this being abused and filled with arbitrary BS. Giving players power in any game is a risk. The cost of your community would be significant and require large investment just to manage. Chobenhood says, only if we have the ability to strike them down if need be. It's one thing to win a popularity contest because they get along with everybody. It's another thing entirely to actually be in a position of authority with power over the world. Yes. Dave Pyre actually posted and commented on his own post because he had a little more to say, and I'm going to read it all. He said, unfortunately, giving a player powers over some aspect of the game will eventually result in some form of exploitation. We all know the term power corrupts. I prefer to know we are all subject to the same game rules with no gray areas, which only a human could introduce. Not saying all elected leaders would do this, but eventually someone will figure out a way where they can benefit from them. Sad truth. It has to be done. Limit power to within a guild. We can leave the guild if need be. Pretty good points there.
Yeah. No, some well thought out ideas there.
Yeah. Pizzazz says absolutely not. In-game leads shouldn't have more power than anyone else other than having some more social pull or standing. But a player shouldn't have to access to how the game plays out or things that they can do to other players. Paul Beecham says, nice juicy post and food for thought. I think it would be really cool if implemented alongside correctly with the diplomacy or perception system. Retired says, popularity contests with the biggest guilds? No thanks. Only way to the king thing is if your guild owned an area or PvP or killed an area boss and the guild leader was king. Nico says, mayor of a small town or something inconsequential like that? Sure. But any rule whose actions have majority or major repercussions throughout the game world should be NPCs, and therefore extensions of the devs and writers creating the lore. It's a nice little touch you put on there, like the devs and the lore writers should be controlling the narrative, not the players.
Yeah, I can't agree with that enough. It's like, I do not want players writing the lore from the game. It's like, that's like, having somebody off the street come into your house and make a meal for you. It's like, no. It's like, I'll get myself or a chef to make my meal. Like, no, I don't like that at all.
And finally, the last one is from Balorni. He says, leadership making decisions with consequences for everyone is definitely something that happens in a world with social interactions. It makes sense. However, nothing should be once and forever. Election/coronation. Good leaders may be reelected. Mad kings will be beheaded. So that's everybody's post I took. Overwhelming majority of people are like, no. It was very hard to find things that were semi-positive or say, this might be okay. And hopefully there were a little bit of difference in opinions in some of those that we read. But overall, people did not want this. And I'll tell you, even as someone who could benefit from this, maybe, or maybe not, I want nothing to do with an election system. I want nothing to do with areas controlled by certain guilds and you see their flags up. I just have never found that to be an enjoyable experience for me in any MMORPG. And typically when I've played games that have that, I think Albion has a lot of that. It's the same guild everywhere. Like you just see the same flags. The biggest guild typically controls it. It's one of the, we've talked a lot about how MMORPGs, one of the things that I think that's been a downfall for MMORPGs is that they're constantly taking from other genres, like Ashes of Creation. Like I'm not talking crap on them. I don't know enough about that game to be completely honest, to like talk eloquently about it, but it's one of those games that just has so many systems, right? And it's on paper, it's crazy and it sounds amazing. But to me, I just like the core MMO experience. Like I think introducing like survival and simcraft and house building and like all that stuff to me is there's other genres for that. Like I think the MMO needs to stick to the core values of a genre. And this election system just feels like I get it in like fantasy novels and Game of Thrones. It's cool. And I get that it has a place in role-playing games, but it's not something I'm into. I would not be at all interested in this type of a system. Even if I had a powerful guild, even if that was something I could take advantage of, I just don't think I could be bothered with it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's the only thing I like about it is somebody said something about assassination. I'm like, okay, well, maybe if somebody gets elected and then I have the option to assassinate them, that might be kind of fun. And I thought maybe you would be into that as sort of the rogue of the group, might be into that. But no, this is a terrible idea, and I don't want to have anything to do with this. It sounds a lot like a leaderboard aspect to me, and I hate leaderboard aspects in games a lot. I'm not big on that. Just a PvE game like Pantheon is about, working together. It's about doing things together. This is like a divisive thing that drives people apart into separate camps and pits people against each other.
Politics are divisive, Theric?
Who knew? Yeah. So I just, the less of this in the world, the better. I know Joppa's a huge PvP fan, and he's talked about that. So we have to, account that there's going to be some PvP in the game for sure. I just hope it's not something that's a big system like this that gets put in. You mentioned Game of Thrones. There's a good quote from, I remember which season it is, but where Joffrey is railing about, being told to go to bed. And he says, you can't tell me to go to bed. I'm the king. And I think it's Tyrion says back to me, he's like, anybody who has to tell somebody they're king is no real king, I love that. And I think that's basically how I feel about this. Like if you need to be elected and made the king, you're not really a king or a queen or a leader. You're real leaders and people like that come about naturally and don't need to be elected to that kind of stuff. So leave the silliness at the door, if you ask me.
Yeah, the last thing I'll leave it with, you talked about like the assassination thing, right? Like if this ever came into Pantheon, like our guild right now is about like events and community and helping people and being a reliable source. That's what the Plus guild's all about. We would slightly change that to be the guild that constantly assassinates whatever kings are like just literally our whole guild's about like, oh, someone's elected king. All right, let's go kill him.
We would change the name of the guild to Plus, and then in brackets now with more death.
Yeah.
Because
Plus
we would be
death.
Assassinating everyone. That's right.
Well, that's it from VR. Good stuff this week. I love how some of these posts, like back in the day, some of these Twitter posts, people were like, oh, why do they do this? But it's so great once you start really reading into the comments and how the community interacts and kind of breaking it down on a more community level. That, and then of course the Kyle stream is a really good one. So check that out again. But that's it for VR news and notes.
When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about. Okay, get your popcorn ready because we're going to go into get your popcorn ready. We're going to go into another topic, might cause some fiery debate. And this week, our friend and Pantheon Plus lead writer Draq penned an article over on the Pantheon.plus site called "Toggle Your Transmog." So, as you can imagine, this is a contentious issue, and I'm just going to read you a brief piece of his article from the introduction, so you have an idea what we're going to be talking about here. So this is what Draq says. He says, VR's stated plan is to have a toggle switch for cosmetic items. So it could be on, in which case you would see other people's transmogs or cosmetics, or it would be off, in which case you would see the graphics of the actual gear the person's wearing. If you like cosmetic items, you can have it on. If you don't like them, you can turn it off. So Draq's argument as he goes through his article basically he disagrees with this idea, and he takes the position that he hopes like VR, like sort of through testing or other article, or even through reading the article, maybe considers not doing something like this. And he gives three primary reasons why he's against it. He says, one, it's not how I look to myself, it's about how I look to others. The second point he makes is it really a transmog system if nobody sees it? So like if you have the option, like why even bother with it? And then the third point he makes is, this is a really interesting one I hadn't heard before. He says, like, what's the default setting? He linked an article that has done a study that shows like 95% of people just use whatever the default settings are in most things, which is kind of interesting. I didn't know that.
Now, before you continue on, I need to say this because I was in trouble last week. I'm probably already in trouble for the add-on thing and the DPS meters. I want to say I have not read anything from this point forward that Theric's going to say. And I just want everyone to know that while everyone says Minus is the jerk, Theric is baiting me. I'm being baited. I just want to make that very clear. And everyone knows what's going to happen, I'm sure. But Theric, continue on.
I told you earlier, like we were joking around back and forth, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm triggering you for fun this week." That's right. So now, anyway, carrying on. So Draq does a really good job of making his point, and I encourage everyone to go read the article. There will be a link in the description because this topic's been tossed around a lot on the official forums ever since VR talked about it and taking this approach. In fact, there is a massive 27-page thread over there. So obviously I've done the hard work for everyone here, and I've gone through that thread and tried to sift through it, pick out some of the more interesting and well sort of thought out comments. So you're welcome. But let's go through it and hear what some of the people said. First up was 187, a frequent commenter and well-known community member. He says, I always felt the toggle should be used to determine whether or not you want to show off whether you want your character to show off the appearance that you've worked for. The main purpose of utilizing an appearance slot is to show to allow players to express the look that they've earned without sacrificing efficiency. The current plan for toggle implementations seems like it would lead to players setting an expectation on whether or not others used it. So like he gives an example of like raid rule number 7, you must have your appearance gear toggled on. So he sees that happening. Nefel said, I feel like it's better to give people the option, even if it results in situations where players aren't wearing the armor that we would expect them to use. Yes, people will abuse it. Yes, it'll be annoying, but let's be real, that would have happened anyway. Doherty says, an option to have the player see the character in pretend gear isn't nearly as bad as one that inflicts this on other players, though I don't see the need to waste resources on this. If VR is going to do the pretend gear route, an irreducible minimum, give us an option to disable it. Ixar says, I'd very much prefer having a toggle for seeing other people in adventure or cosmetic gear, being able to switch it on or off depending on the mood or what task I'm attempting seems beneficial to me. Just about every MMO I've played that has cosmetic options has made me wish I had a toggle for this, especially Final Fantasy XIV. Disposalist says, what other people show has no effect on the prestige of your items. In fact, it would effectively make yours a more rare look. I understand some would want to show off their accomplishments. I don't understand how some appear to want to force others to show off theirs. Absolute Terror says, if VR made a toggle to turn off all the mess that I see on my screen, is you wearing a level 50 in-game gear, but on your screen, you see yourself wearing a tuxedo, I'm cool with that.
Always goes that route. Always goes the route of some outlandish look. Like VR has openly said they're not going to have bunny costumes. You're not going to have tuxedos. God.
So we've seen some back and forth. We've seen different stances on this, but there's going to be some interesting ones. There are some ones that I think you're going to agree with more than that one. So next up was Sabat. He said, I just can't see why the toggle is a problem. Everyone wins.
Hold on, stop before you continue. Stop.
Okay.
I can't see why the toggle is a problem. Everyone wins. Am I wrong in saying this community wants everything but an MMORPG where everyone just gets everything they want all the time? Is that a common thing said in this? Like, it should be about what the game wants. Like, there's no participation trophies. The game isn't made. The game's going to be this way. But yet this comes up all the time. Well, just give everyone what they want. No, like that's not how the world should work. Okay, continue on.
I think he's speaking at it from a more of a compromise standpoint instead of like everybody getting what they want. It's a compromise to. Well, because there's opinions on both sides, and
should there be a compromise like I don't want mobs to hit me as hard, so I need a toggle for the game to be easier for me. But I get that that's a crazy I get it, but at what point do we stop? Like, at what point do the toggles stop? Like, if we're going to toggle everything, are there going to be 7,000 toggles? No, but there should be, right? Like, so,
no, I don't think so.
There should be. If we're going to have a toggle on this system, why aren't there toggles on others?
No.
You say no, and you say that because you personally don't see it as a big issue, I don't think. But what about if, like, what if I don't want to fish? Like, if I don't ever want to have to fish, like, or I don't, I hate this toggle thing. Like, like turning something off because you don't like it. That's juvenile.
Yeah. Well, I think there are good reasons on both sides.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll get to it.
You have a lot more to read, so go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, Sabat goes on to say, he says, the people that want to look ridiculous can. The ones that want to dress.
If I want to wear the armor in the game that's already there, how do I look ridiculous? People have no idea what Transmog gives. People are stuck on costuming and loot box and buying costumes from Asian games. They do not know what Transmog is.
That's true. They
have no idea what Transmog is. Like, the Transmog that is being proposed by everybody who wants Transmog has nothing to do with this cosmetic goofy gear. Nothing. I just want to be very clear.
Looking ridiculous, though, can mean different things, though. I mean, some people think that having to use the appearance, like the regular gear, without any sort of appearance on top of it, looks ridiculous when you're sacrificing stats for appearance. What looks ridiculous is when none of your gear matches, because I've never watched a fantasy movie where, someone in Lord of the Rings is wearing, 15 different colored armor. I've never seen that. I've never seen it in a comic book. I've never seen it in a movie. I've never had it reading in a book where they describe what their armor looks like. Everybody matches. Everybody has a distinctive look. Characters have a distinctive look. Nobody's wearing 15 shades of multiple colors. That's a good idea, actually, for a comic or a book or a story, something like that. I could see that.
I'm sorry. Anyway, I told you I wouldn't interrupt, and Sabat, I apologize. I've interrupted your point here 3 times already. Go ahead.
We may get through his point. I'm not sure we will, but we will try. Anyway, he goes on to say, so he says, the ones who want to dress up look good. They what they think looks good. And then those who want to show what they're actually using can. And those that don't want to see anyone else's creation, good or bad, don't have to see it. You should not be able to force your fake appearance on me any more than you can force vile or toxic chat. I have an ignore command for chat, and the toggle is the same for dress up. The argument that everyone will be confused by commands like follow the dwarf with the green helm is just crazy. Tell them to follow Dara's or whatever the name over the dwarf's head is. Okay, so that's his post. Grimlock says a toggle simply allows me and others to share my view to opt out of any fashion quest. It doesn't affect you in any way. You see what you want on your screen, and I see what I want on mine. Gameplay is not affected at all. As for a toggle making it pointless and confusing, I just don't get it. Those that want to dress up for whatever reason get to do so. Those that don't also get to do so as well. Seems like a win-win. One last thing, if a toggle's in place, how would we even know what any given player is seeing unless you actually ask them? I can't see a downside. That's a good point. You would never know what other people are seeing unless you actually ask them.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
if
but it's interesting.
There, it will discourage the whole entire system.
That's a legit point. That Draq makes that point in his article as well.
If you're going to put an entire system in the game, but then give everyone the chance to negate it, why would I work hard? Like, so you just spent all this time making a system that's worthless at this point. And I think a huge majority of people would feel that way.
Yep, I can't disagree with that part.
Imagine you have a huge guild event, right? You take a big screenshot, you're so excited, and the guy who took the screenshot has all the gear off, and you look like a tool bag, and you're like, "Oh, that sucks." Right? That's a big deal. That's a memory.
Yeah, that would suck. I can agree with that. That would definitely be a problem.
And you don't even know how bad you look because you're transmog, but you're wearing the gear you need to be in that raid, right?
Yeah,
it's awful. Okay.
Because no other game has done this. You know, I don't think we have any sort of data set to work from. You know, like we don't have any examples
because it's
of this being
because the whole argument of a role playing game, the whole argument of another player in a role playing game controlling how you look is asinine.
Controlling what they see.
It doesn't matter.
It's
a role play. Theric, what if they change your name? Because they don't like your name.
That's a good point too, but you can turn off player names. What if I have one of the titles and I want to...
Instead of Theric, you're Legolas.
Well, okay, but let's just use a more realistic example and say titles, right? Let's say I have 6 titles after my name.
It's not the same.
But if somebody wants to turn the titles off...
If you write a fiction piece about Theric, are you going to describe how Theric looks? Are you going to describe his armor?
Yeah.
Is that important?
Yeah.
Because that's part of your character, right?
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
It's but I read the story and I interpret it the way that I'm writing it.
What if they can change what race you were? I get that these are outlandish.
If that made people enjoy the story more, is that a bad thing?
Yes, because I pay. This is going to be sounding horrible, but I pay to have a character with my name that is me. Yeah. Why can someone else change who I am? Why can someone else rewrite my story?
Yeah, no, that's true. There's definitely pieces of it that I can see that side of it. The next response is kind of interesting. I think Jabir, he says, everybody must see the same always. A piece of gear on a character is as much a part of the shared virtual world as anything else in the environment. I want to be able to chat meaningfully about what I see on people and what they see on me. Any clever ideas to remedy this and all other appearances you've mentioned are most welcome. Please don't try to solve differences in opinions with individualized view options. They do more harm than good for the overall game experience. So I think he's more in line with what you're saying. Accolade says, I'm against a toggle that lets me decide how another player appears.
100%.
One in my client that toggles how I appear to others is fine, but seems pointless. Let others enjoy the game their way, not yours.
Yep.
Cass says, as been discussed, a toggle is a horrible option. I like the example he uses here. He says, my wife doesn't put on makeup to go out for her to see herself, but rather so others can see how she wants to be represented. Her mood, her status, her passions, that kind of thing. It does not matter to me, but to the people who it matters to. Others being able to toggle their chosen appearance off renders the whole idea irrelevant. This is not a compromise for most of the crowd that want cosmetic options. It's straight up denial.
Perfect.
And then, yeah.
I love you, Cass.
Good one. Yeah. I like the example about the wife going out with makeup. That's a pretty on point example.
Yeah.
Hard to argue with that. The last one is from Aethor. He says, they say, in case any change to appearance is allowed, it must be equally visible to everyone. A situation where 2 or more people look at the same person and everybody sees them differently breaks the immersion beyond repair.
So here's one more thing before you jump into this. So do we want to disable enchanter racial changes?
Yeah, that's a good point too. No, I don't think so.
The enchanter comes in and they change themselves from a human into a dwarf. Do we want that off? Because we're not seeing them for exactly what they are. So do we want to negate illusions?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think we do. But I think that it's a temporary thing. That's not a permanent thing though, too, is to keep in mind. That would be like a temporary illusion.
Like if I'm a rogue and I go get a set of gear that makes me look dark and shrouded and look like a rogue, but to be properly efficient, I look more like a monk. Mm-hmm. Like, what's wrong with me looking like a rogue? I'm a rogue. I'm not wearing a tuxedo. I'm not wearing a bunny outfit. I'm wearing a black hood with a black cloak with black gloves on and maybe some gray and some cool daggers. Yeah. Why can't I look like a rogue?
Yeah, no, like it's hard to deny options, right? It's hard to sort of deny choices when they're presented as an option. So I'll just sort of say what I was thinking about here, because that sort of speaks to what you're saying. Like I remember when I first was learning about Pantheon and I heard Brad talking about ideas to address, cosmetics and that kind of stuff. And he was one of them. One of his ideas was the toggle. And at the time, I really thought it sounded like a good compromise. On its face, it's one of those things that offers players more control, more options, and generally more personalized experience, right? Like, so on its face, how can that be bad? But then as time has gone on, I have gained an appreciation for other viewpoints on the topic. And I think my view has shifted quite a bit, actually. A lot of the commentary here reflects, the discussions that I've heard. And I think the argument that speaks the loudest to me on the idea of a toggle is sort of a form of instancing. It is almost a form of instancing. And I've been against instancing from day one. I really am heavily on the other side of no instancing. And a lot of people talk about why it's important for everyone to see the world the same. And I agree with that. It's, that's instancing in my mind. And it separates the world into like these virtual layers. So you've got like the layer of people who don't have the toggle on. And then you've got the layer of people who have the toggle on and see different things. So you're already in a virtual world. You don't want to create these alternate realities on top of each other. I think it takes a lot away from the shared world aspect of things. And we just go into our own little, bubbles of reality. So if I can toggle your cosmetic gear off, my reality is no longer the same as yours. And I don't really like that. Now, I'll just end by saying the counter argument because I can see the other side too, is that we can already do this with certain things. So somebody mentioned the ignore command, right? I can do /ignore you and I can control what I can hear from you, and it limits what you can say to me or eliminates it altogether. Is that the same thing? What about being able to turn off names? We talked about this earlier, like titles above somebody's head or names. Is your title part of your identity? And I don't think most people would argue against these types of options. Like nobody's saying I don't want to be able to turn off names or titles or anything like that. I don't want to have different UI options. That's not a character thing, so it's a little different. But so if you're listening to this and you're agreeing with that, then why is a toggle okay, right? If is it just because gear falls into a special category? I don't know. I can be a little all or nothing in my thinking on these things sometimes. So if there's a contradiction, it does bother me when things don't always line up like that. But again, at the end of the day, if I have to choose, I have come around to saying I'm not as keen on the toggle as I was at first blush. So does that make sense to you? I mean, do you think these things, do you think that those things can coexist, that the last things I talked about there? And at the end of the day, I know obviously you aren't in favor of this, right?
Well, ignoring somebody because they're abusive or out of character or trolling has nothing to do with a role play aspect of what your character looks like. So while people can try to use that as an example, it's a horrible example. Here, I'm gonna role play some things here with you, and I want you to answer completely honestly. We obviously don't do this in advance. When I say Daenerys, what do you see? What's the first thing that pops in your head?
Like the character Daenerys Targaryen?
White hair. Physical attribute, right?
Yeah.
When I say Spider-Man, what's the first thing you think of?
Yeah, the red suit.
I'll name every famous character. What do you think of when I say Captain America?
Yeah, you see
the image of these people. So why is it wrong that if you are a huge fan of Pantheon and Minus is always running around your server, that when I say Minus, you see an image of what Minus looks like?
No.
What's wrong?
Yeah, your identity is really strongly attached to your appearance. No,
identity is hugely attached to my appearance. Hugely. Mm-hmm. Every character we can think of, you have a visual image of them before anything else because it stands out. It's what they look like, right? Think about like the Joker is a great character, right? Mm-hmm. What happened when people saw Jared Leto's Joker? It's still the Joker. It's still this amazing character with tons of background. The second that they saw the Joker in the Jared Leto form, everyone went, ooh. It disregarded everything about the Joker. It disregarded everything about the character, the sadisticness, the fact that Jared Leto's an amazing actor. Everything was out the door because the visual representation of this Joker was because it's what the Joker is.
It's so connected to the color purple for the Joker, right? Like there's that, it's just an instant connection. And even more than any of the other characters you mentioned.
Tattoos on him, this gangster vibe. It wasn't the Joker because it didn't look like the Joker. It didn't feel like the Joker. It's the same thing as if we're going to create characters in a world that matters, where reputation matters, where characters matter. Why aren't we in control of that?
Yeah. It's funny too, because, I mean, VR hasn't talked about the toggle in a long time. So, who knows where they're at with this anymore. I mean, again, this was one of those ideas that got tossed around early. I think it was a Brad idea, and who knows, where it's at now, if they're still even in the realm of consideration. But it definitely does. It has more downs than positives. I don't think that there's much going for it in terms of if it's about identity, if it is about your character's identity. And
the identity of individual players and characters is more important than the identity of items.
Yeah.
I'm not saying items aren't important. And the thing is that's something that I'm really frustrated about. If there's a dagger that drops and there's like 10 of them and it's super rare, in 3 years from now, I'm transmogging that dagger onto a dagger that's more common, but happens to be better. I think that item lives on further instead of it just being deleted and out of people's bags.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. This is the concept of transmog in general. We've had discussions about, so we won't go into that too far. But I've agreed with you on that as well, and come to see some different perspectives on it. So I think this is one of those things that we need to really focus on. Yes, you see your character a certain way, but understanding that other people, it's like Draq's article, the first point he made, it's not about what I see, it's about what others see. And what other people see is important, and it's just the bottom line, I guess you would say. So that's great. It's a good discussion. I really enjoyed that sort of take on it. And I'm sure we'll have more, discussion in the comments from the video and maybe on Twitter, who knows where. But anything else to say on that, or you're good?
No, that's it. I'm happy. I mean, we've gone a little bit longer in these sections of it. So
yeah. Okay.
Cool. It's pretty awesome. I mean, it's good debate. It's important. It's important to the game. I have a hard time relating to other people wanting to control other people's playing experiences. And I struggle with understanding that in a role-playing game. So
yeah, fair enough. Okay, so then we'll finish up this section with a fan project that I want to mention. I want to give a shout out to a couple new content creators, actually. There's a show called Disparite Worlds, and it's hosted by two fellas, Moxus and Sakari. So the premise of the show is they're both MMO fans, and one is following, that's Moxus, is interested in Pantheon, while the other is Sakari is more interested in Ashes of Creation. So what they do is they talk about it, they compare the two, they learn, they debate, they discuss the features of each of the different games. And I have to say, I've listened to 3 episodes of theirs so far. It's been really interesting to hear these two games contrasted and from different perspectives. And when you realize how different Pantheon and Ashes is, or will be, I guess, it's an interesting thing. But you realize, again, these two friends, talking about this, that we're all MMO fans, and the show is good for reinforcing that idea of brotherhood of gamers, and rather than this us versus them mentality that we get into sometimes. It's also been, for me, a good way of learning about Ashes of Creation, because I don't really follow it. So I'll leave a link in the description, and if you want to go check out their show, I would recommend doing so. So that's it for this week's community discussions. Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. Okay, so we will go into our lore section now. And when we talk about the races of Terminus, we talk in generalities. We say the elves are this, the ogres are that, but we really should be more specific because within most of the races, there are different clans, subsets, even variants. One of them is the halflings. And in fact, if you didn't know, there's 3 aspects of halfling society, or 3 primary branches of the people, that being the Escap, the Maiden Clan, and the Nothi. They all live in relative peace, distinct but not segregated. So the Escap clan has worked to establish trade partnerships and alliances with other races, as well as providing governmental structure for Sohirith itself, and that's the halfling village. Not surprisingly, many of today's Escaps claim to be of the bloodline of those nobles, and their desire to lead flows from that lost status. Some demand recognition, while others feel a sincere responsibility to their people. And then there's the Maiden Clan. They're easily the most reserved or contemplative of the race, seeking to find, follow, and know the 6 wards that guide their people. These are the scholars of their people, and history is far more important to the Maiden Clan than the Nothi or even the Escaps. In fact, the Maiden Clan takes its name and motivation from the first Maiden Lyon, who was also a voracious student of Kiri history, Kirin, the Warden of Flame, and culture in general. And then lastly, the Nothi clan of halfling society. They're the relentless wraith hunters. They're an unrepentant wild breed. These halflings glory in destroying the legacy of the one who cursed them so long ago. And that's the lore you know. And with that, it's time to check the mailbox.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it gets here, I just yell, mail! We're getting sued. All right, so let's get into some of the questions from our mailbox contributors. The first was LaFell, and they asked, what social experience are you wanting from Pantheon, and how does this differ from other games in general, if at all? We talked a lot about this last week, right? Like social experience being meaningful, right? So yeah. I'm going to just answer this very simply is, the social experience of the friendships and memories I made in WoW are what I hope to do here. And that doesn't mean that I want Pantheon to be like, wow, put your pitchforks down, everybody. I'm sorry, I played a game for 14 years. I still love EverQuest. I can like multiple games. It's okay. But I want that experience. I want really good guild play. I want really good achievements to go after. And when I say achievements, I don't mean a little box with a check off. I mean actually achieving something, going out and downing enemies and finding our way to overcome. That's the kind of stuff I want. I want to build a lot of relationships. I want to log on every day and ask people how they're doing. I want to fraternize with the guild. I want to talk in Discord when I'm at work with them. I just want to build these relationships that the world's constantly evolving through, right? When I'm not playing, I'm talking to them on Discord about what they're doing. Just this constant way to connect with the Pantheon world, to be able to make a positive influence in the world and to have a great group of people to play with. That's what I'm looking forward to. And the fact that, it's more meaningful to have group content, I think helps even better.
Yeah. It's a good answer. And I like this as a follow-up to last week. Like you said, I think it does stem from that. And, it's a pretty simple question for me. I want an experience that takes any investment I make into being social and translates that into progression or opportunity or achievement. My experience with recent MMOs, the question is, how does this differ from other games in the genre, if at all? My experience with recent MMOs is that the social experience isn't tied to those things anymore. It isn't tied to the game mechanics or design. It's there. It's like we discussed last week, socializing is there. You can do it for its own sake. And certainly it's possible. And it can be very rewarding if that's that's what you're looking for. But when it's detached from the game's mechanics and design, I think it loses something. So that's the social experience I'm looking for from Pantheon, is reconnecting my ability to be social with making progress in the game or making, achieving in the game. So I think that's where I would answer that.
Awesome. So JJ asks, MMORPGs are often just the beginning. In some cases, they branch out into other mediums, console RPGs, card games, lore books, etc. For Pantheon, what are some other mediums you would like to see so you can enjoy Pantheon beyond it just being a computer game for you to log into?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to take this one first because I know what JJ's doing here. JJ's being sneaky and trying to get me back into Hearthstone. He's putting it out there. We've been talking on Discord, and Hearthstone's got an expansion coming out and a reworking of their systems, I guess. So I've struggled with it and I'm thinking about it. But JJ, no, I'm not coming back. I can't do it. But if there ended up being a Pantheon CZ, collectible card game down the road, man, I would be like all over that in a heartbeat. But it's kind of funny. It's a good question because Pantheon is definitely a game about class interdependence and social gaming. So it absolutely would lend itself to some sort of a tabletop game. This is like somebody who has a very limited experience with tabletop gaming, saying this. I don't do a lot of it. I haven't done a lot of it. Even like a co-op board game would be pretty cool. But if I had my personal choice, the novels if JN started writing some novels, and dude, whatever you write, I will read it. It's like that science, it's like that bit from Anchorman where Ron Burgundy just reads whatever's on the teleprompter. Like, JN, you write it, man. I am reading it. So I'd go for novels. What about you?
Card games are awesome. I really am a big fan of card games. So that would be cool. I'll tell you, one of the things that I got really into very late in World of Warcraft was that they released these chronicle books, and they weren't like huge reads. They were small reads of like lore, but they were huge books. They were really well done, artistic. And I think what was cool is the first book was about Legion, because in the story of WoW, Legion was kind of first, and that kind of led to the orcs coming, and that kind of led to the Lich King. That was the major cycles. But it was interesting interesting because we were playing Legion at the time, which was a further expansion, but it was digging into all these old concepts of how Warcraft came to be. So it was weird. I was reading the first like encyclopedia of WoW as I was playing Legion. And at the same time, it was like really in line with everything. And it was this level of knowledge. I spent hours talking to the guild about like, we'd see an enemy and like, oh, like, let me tell you about this. And people got like super into it.
That's so cool.
I really like it was, and again, just timing, right? Like if I had read those books a long time before that, I probably wouldn't have remembered it. But it's literally reading it as we were experiencing it. I was like, wow, this is really neat. So I got really, really into that. Like cool. Obsessively. So that kind of thing, like really, you know, like these cool deep digs on characters and anything that makes the characters of the game more important to me is really cool. So like card games, lore, stuff like that is probably where I would say the most. So
right on.
Okay. Next one here. Failure is the greatest teacher. What is the lesson you've learned from failing in MMORPGs? You know, running a guild, one of the things that we've always had in our raids is like, don't call out other members. There's a raid leader. They will look at what's going on and they will talk individually for people. There's no benefit in someone in the guild starting to yell at another guild member. We're a team. And if you can't be part of that team and you can't respect your teammates, even when someone's struggling, like then you're not part of this guild. And I think that like what I've learned is like, sometimes I tried to hold on to like some of the better performers, the people topping DPS meters or the really strong players, because they would be the first ones to start complaining about the lower level people. And, you know, that to me, like being a leader and having these strict standards on what we do, what I learned is like, if you can't be in the standards, I don't care how well you perform. Like you're either part of the family or you're not, because after a fight's dead and gone, the guild's still there. So like prioritizing these individual tiny moments in your frustration is not as important as prioritizing the future of the guild and the history of the guild. So what I really learned is like when someone's a problem, I hate saying this because people can change, but it's not my duty all the time to be there through all the levels of change. Someone can go change somewhere else. And I think we learned to really cut the cord on problems before they become bigger. And I think that was a big thing I learned over the course of my, you know, tons of years playing MMORPGs that like, it's really hard to corral people from all over the world with different ideals and different upbringings into one group. And sometimes people just aren't going to fit.
Yeah, that's a great point. My answer is kind of related to that. It's on a similar level. You know, for me, it's about, I've learned a lot about relationships in general playing MMOs. And I've learned, you know, relationships, they're difficult for one, but then they can fail when you don't attend to them or you neglect them, you know. I have made the mistake in past MMOs of meeting people and having a great time and having a good experience, but then I just don't foster the relationship, right? I don't make an effort to make time to go back and do more stuff with them. Even though we had a great time, I get busy doing something else, or I forget about it, or I'm doing, you know, off on some other sort of tangent or something. So I've learned that, you know, not to take people for granted. You know, it's important to think of relationships as being a living sort of organism, and you have to be there and sort of be there to nurture them to some extent. And they're also an investment, you know, and I think that's a big part of my mindset with Pantheon is that we might never have the opportunity to play a game like this again. They may never make another game like this, depending on how things go. You know, maybe they will and be great, but what if this is our last opportunity to play a game where, you know, the social experience matters so much, you know? I've determined that I'm not going to make some of the mistakes in the past, and I'm not going to take that for granted. So let's not waste our opportunity on this one. So that'd be my answer.
And the last question for this episode is, what are the versions of transport you want to see in Pantheon? And why would you want those types? And he gives examples like boats, flying ships, flying taxis, road taxis, teleports, player vehicles, mounts, etc. So what do you think?
Well, yeah, he had some good examples there. I don't know about the flying taxi, the road taxi. Those are all pretty funny. I thought, what about the pogo stick? What about the submarine? You know,
well, what he means is like in WoW, before there were flying mounts, you could pay for a Griffin rider to take you on a preset path. And that was like a flying taxi. That's what that was called. So it wasn't efficient. You had to follow a path. It took forever, but you could get up and walk away while it flew you to where you wanted to be.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to go the purest route, keep it simple. I'm just going to say player teleportation is really the only thing that I really am interested in doing. In fact, you know, I think Maybe one.
Not player run boats, but like,
No, I know, like
EQ?
the EQ type boat. Yeah, I get it. Maybe, but I think that it's more important that they put players at the center of everything. I think classes like the Summoner should be able to summon like temporary mounts or maybe a temporary boat. Keep it player centric, right? Keep teleportation to wizards and druids, so that just, or another class. It doesn't have to be just them or whatever, and maybe use a summoner in some way. Maybe another class can sort of fit into the travel options. I really like to keep it player centric if it were up to me. But if there's mounts in the game, of a certain stock, I wouldn't complain too much. But what about you?
I think boats are important. I think I'm okay with not having any taxi services. I think teleporting from players is important. I don't want any type of flying at all. Because I just don't want to skip the world and I don't want to see it from that angle. I want to explore it from the ground level. I do think, though, this like anti-mounts thing is very weird because, for me, again, going back to thinking of every fantasy realm ever, they're riding horses. Everybody and every single thing ever. And if there are animals out in the world, wouldn't it hurt immersion if nobody in the entire world's like, hey, we could ride that and tame it?
and nobody's thought of it.
Nobody's thought of it.
Have you ever thought of like getting a deer from the forest?
And like riding on it? They're fast.
Oh my God, what a crazy idea.
So, to protect my immersion, Theric, I think mounts need to happen. They just shouldn't be like cheetahs. Everything shouldn't be a cheetah. But I think mounts are important. I think that you still need to have importance on like run speed buffs. But keep in mind, there's a lot of areas you can't use mounts. So those run speed buffs should take the place of that too. And run speed buffs are also awesome for like combat and stuff. You can't ride a mount. You can't have a mount in combat. So I think mounts need to happen. Ground mounts should happen. Player teleports, boats, that kind of stuff. I think it's all important. So that's where I'll stand on that.
I agree.
All right, well, that's it for this week's episode. We went over a little bit. We did an extra 10 minutes today. Geez, and we skipped some sections because we are going a little longer. So good debate. Theric, you probably got me in trouble again. So thanks for that. This is going to become very quickly everybody hates Minus, but I think everybody does anyway, so boo-hoo.
Oh no, everybody loves you. You know that.
Yeah. But anyway, I did want to mention, since we skipped it, the articles thing is really starting up. Draq posted some articles. I took my hand at writing an article. I'm not a writer. I'm very conversational. That's why I do podcasts and videos. So if you read it, it'll probably come off almost script-like or almost conversational. But I also want to give a huge shout out because we got our first community submitted article from Tech Ninja where he talks about like languages and player barriers in games with factions having different languages and stuff. Really cool. Really excited to see Tech Ninja put something out because even though Drax put out great articles and I enjoyed putting mine out, we're part of Pantheon Plus. The whole article thing is here because we really want to enable people to have a platform using Pantheon.plus to be able to get their opinions out there, to write articles and guides. So Tech Ninja, awesome. You are the first ever of hopefully many more to come. I love the article and hopefully we'll see even more. But that's it for the rewind. I hope you guys enjoyed. Sorry for taking up 12 extra minutes or maybe even a little bit more of your time. But thank you guys and we'll hopefully see you next week. Theric, as always, thank you for joining me and being at my side here, man.
Always. Cheers, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Be sure to follow Minus and all Pantheon Plus related content on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube under the name Pantheon Plus. Also, be sure to follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter. Keep up to date on all Pantheon Rise of the Fallen information on www.pantheon.plus, the definitive source for all media of Pantheon. Until next time.